Hello. In last tutorial, we wrote a Java program to swap two numbers, but we used a temporary variable. In this tutorial, we will write a Java program to swap two numbers without using temporary variable. We will not use any variable other than the two numbers. That's it. So let's take number from user. We take enter number one. We store it into integer type number one equals to reader dot next int. Okay. Let me. Okay. So I give an other message enter number two and read it into an integer variable number 2 equals to reader dot next int. So now since we have read two numbers, number 1 and number 2, time to swap them. So before swapping, I want to print them so that we know the value of them. So this is before swapping. Okay? Before swapping, uh, number 1 is number 1 and number 2 is number 2. Okay, so we have printed it and we will also print the same after swapping. And I say after swapping, and right over here we will do the swapping. Okay, so we have taken two numbers from the user, number 1 and number 2. We are printing them before swapping so that we know what number 1 is, what number 2 is, and after swapping we are also printing them so that we know after they have been swapped what the value of number 1 is and what the value of number 2 is. So our swapping procedure will start right over here. So what we do is we say number 1 equals to number 1 minus number 2, and number 2 equals to number 1 plus number 2, and finally number 1 equals to number 2 minus number 1. If you don't understand, that's fine, I will explain to you later. First let's run it and see if they have been swapped. Okay, so number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20, and let me expand it. So if you see, before swapping number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20, after swapping number 1 is 20, number 2 is 10. So they have been swapped, which means our program is right. So now let me explain to you what is actually happening. So let's say we have our number 1 equals to 10 and number 2 equals to 20. So right over here our number 1 will be equals to number 1 minus number 2. So number 1 is 10 minus 20 will be equals to minus 10. Okay, and over here number 2 will be equals to number 1 plus number 2. Number 1 is now minus 10, so this will be minus 10, and plus number 2. So plus number 2 is 20, so plus 20 equals to 10. So now our number 2 equals to 10. Okay, and over here this is number 1 equals to, so number 1 equals to number 2, which is our 10. So number 2, which is 10, and minus, this is minus, and minus number 1, and number 1 is minus 10. So minus, we are minus 10. So this will be minus multiplied by minus plus. So 10 plus 10, 20. So now after execution of these three statements, if you see, number 1 now has 20, number 2 now has 10. And before swapping, number 1 was 10, number 2 was 20. So after these three statements, our numbers have been swapped. Since they are swapped, when we print them, number 1 printed is as 20 and number 2 has value 10. That's it. I hope you have understood. If you did, please subscribe my YouTube channel and I will see you in next tutorial.